Burning Question, presented by Greenply, powered by Honda Elevate and Edelweiss Mutual Fund.
Israel counters Hamas propaganda, says Gaza hospital was attacked by Hamas rocket that misfired.
This is the parking lot. You can see the parking lot also now in this picture shown here. Okay, aftermath, after the hit. There is no structural damage to the building. The walls stayed intact. There are no craters here.
Israeli Defense Forces present pointed proof to the world on Hamas.
I wanted to be here today for a simple reason. I wanted the people of Israel, the people of the world, to know where the United States stands. I've had my great Secretary of State here. He's been here for a lot. But I wanted to personally come and make that clear.
And holds talks with Netanyahu, reaffirms that other side to be blamed for hospital attack. Iran calls on Muslim nations to expel their Israeli ambassadors and launch an oil embargo on Israel.
गांधी परिवार जिसने कर्नाटका को भ्रष्टाचार का एटीएम बना रखा है, एटीएम से रुपया निकालो, जनता की जो गाड़ी कमाई है वो रुपया निकालो, और जहां जिस प्रदेश में चुनाव है वहां पे मंत्री जाके और चुनाव को, लोकतंत्र को प्रदूषित करें.
Republic Kannada accesses video showing Karnataka minister in cash shower. Congress caught on back foot.
Karnataka Congress is funding with all the commission money they have collected for the assembly elections here to send for their Telangana Congress party.
National traverse over Republic Kannada news break. BJP asks what is the source of the cash flow. Parliamentary Ethics Committee summons BJP MP Nishikant Dubey over his complaint against Mahua Moitra of the TMC. All right, friends, as we saw pictures of a Gaza hospital bombing, everyone picked up initial reports that it was the work of Israeli airstrikes. Even the platforms like New York Times, BBC, Al Jazeera, of course, almost everyone around the world thought that this was the most condemnable act of Israel since the Hamas attack of October 7, the Gaza hospital, and it sent shockwaves around the world. Hamas narrative put the number of those killed in the airstrike at 500. In fact, Hamas in no time blamed Israel for this attack, followed by the Western media. As I mentioned, everyone there. Fact-checking Western media. Israel has come with a proof of the airstrike being a rocket launch attempt failure by Hamas terrorists. Meanwhile, the US President Joe Biden, while on Israel visit, has backed war-struck nation, clarifying Israel has no involvement behind this attack. Also, US President has extended his full support to one of its closest allies, Benjamin Netanyahu, while the nation is reeling from Hamas barbarity. Given the attack comes ahead of Jordan's summit, the peace initiative to be discussed, the question remains, Was it a deliberate attack to halt peace attacks? Let's look at this package and then I come back to discuss with a panel of guests.
A massive blast rocked a Gaza City hospital packed with wounded and other Palestinians seeking shelter on Tuesday, killing hundreds of people. A video accessed by agencies shows the immediate aftermath of an explosion at Al Ahli Hospital in Gaza. The clip shows flames engulfing a number of vehicles and trees, with the sound of sirens blaring in the background. While Hamas blamed an Israeli airstrike. Israel's military has denied involvement in the blast.
At 6:15 p.m., a barrage of rockets was fired by Hamas to Israel. Then, at 6:59 p.m., a barrage of around 10 rockets was fired by Islamic Jihad from a nearby cemetery. It was at the time that 6:59 p.m. when there were reports of an explosion at the Al-Hali al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza City.
Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson said that Israel instead believed that the explosion was a result of a rocket misfired by Hamas terrorists.
According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened. They went as far as inflating the numbers of casualties. They understood with absolute certainty that it was a rocket misfired by Islamic Jihad that damaged the hospital.
Israel said that had it been an Israeli strike, there would have been structural damage to the building.
No structural damage. The walls stay intact. No craters. These are the characterized that shows that not an aerial munition that have hit the parking lot. The size of the damage we see here is due to the warhead of the Islamic Jihad rocket, but most of the rocket's propellant is still evident due to the short flight of the rocket because the launch failed.
Hamas has denied Israel's claim that it was behind the deadly blast at Al Ahli Hospital. Meanwhile, there has been widespread condemnation of the attack and loss of human lives in the explosion at hospital. The United Nations have expressed horror and strong condemnation over the killing of hundreds of civilians in Gaza hospital, underscoring that attack on hospitals or civilian infrastructure is against international humanitarian law.
I am horrified by the hundreds of people killed at Al Ahli Hospital this same day in Gaza by a strike that I strongly condemned earlier today. I call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to provide sufficient time and space to help realize my two appeals and to ease the epic human suffering we are witnessing. Too many lives and the fate of the entire region hang on the balance. May the spirit of this meeting help those that need to find peace.
Expressing shock over the tragic loss of lives in an attack on a hospital in Gaza, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that civilian casualties in the ongoing conflict were a matter of serious concern and those involved should be held responsible. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
All right, welcome back. Seems like a very conclusive evidence put across by the Israeli Defense Forces on who exactly carried out this blast, which has claimed an unspecified number of lives, initially reported to be 500 plus, but it seems it was all a cook-up by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. To understand the implications, joining me, a panel of guests, Pathikrit Pine. He's a geopolitical analyst, joins us live from Delhi, was closely involved in the G20 arrangements on the side of Y20, which is the Youth 20. Also, Dr. Joseph Chalil, author and publisher of Universal News Network, former chairman of the Indo-American Press Club. He joins us live from Florida, United States. And I would want to begin with Lev Aran. He's a journalist and columnist He joins us live from Amiat, Israel. Lev, you think, given the speed with which what Hamas pushed or wanted to push gained traction around the world, from BBC to New York Times to Wall Street Journal, and obviously in cahoots with this narrative, Al Jazeera, you think Hamas is actually winning the narrative war vis-a-vis Israel this time? And it's unfortunate that this is happening?
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I think the situation now is that at the beginning, I think most of people, even in Israel, we suspected that we have made a mistake in this war. And we have targeted a civil place that should not have been targeted. As the time passed, it was clear that it is a sheer propaganda of Hamas and also Islamic Jihad. If we said Hamas is a proxy of Iran, Islamic Jihad is even more proxy of Iran. And in a way, there was an attempt, and I think this attempt was not successful inside, to put the blame on Israel. And right now, with the Biden visit in Israel, and with some kind of a consensus, at least among the good guys, the right forces in the international arena, I think there is much less pressure in Israel at this front, at the diplomatic front and political front.
Okay. Joseph Chalil, you know, Lev might not agree to it, but it seems that for the first couple of hours, in fact more, everyone in the world almost believed that what Israel has done is a war crime. Everyone almost agreed that this was an act of Israel. It was a barbarity matched by Hamas on October 7, or Israel matching that barbarity of October 7. You think this is happening because Palestinian or the Muslim street around the world has succeeded in a sort of a Stockholm syndrome, where most of the opinion builders around the world actually believe what the Palestinian cause is more than what Israel is suffering from?
Unfortunately, that is
I think
the truth.
There is a consensus in Israel and also a global consensus that Israel is much
Lev, this
stronger
is for Joseph. This is for Mr. Chalil.
That this war will become a real danger to Israel is only if Hezbollah and Iran both will join the war. So, in a way,
Lev,
Israel as a democracy, the expectations from Israel are much more than expectations from Hamas.
Lev,
Nobody expects anything from Hamas, let alone Islamic Jihad.
Lev.
So this is the reason why in the first hours, even we in Israel, among a lot of us believe that maybe we have made such a great mistake, and thank God, of course, it was not our mistake. Now, the point
Lev,
is nobody,
Lev, I want to go
as long as
I want to go to
Islamic
Joseph.
Jihad and Hamas
I want to go to
are
Joseph on that
proxy of
note.
Iran, nobody,
I want to go to Joseph on that note. Joseph, you know, the question was that why is it that increasingly it seems that the Hamas is succeeding more than Israel in terms of pushing their basic facts also? Is it because there is sort of a Stockholm syndrome with which the Western press and the opinion makers suffer in terms of seeing what the Palestinian cause is, but not looking at the suffering of Israel?
I agree with you 100%. It's may not be the Stockholm syndrome per se, but the challenge is that most of the media, whether it is European media, American media, Asian media, were very ready to blame Israel for anything. So they were waiting for the past 10 days to Israel to commit some sort of a urban warfare, cause some, human rights violations. We were so prepped for it, and we jumped the gun, thinking that this was an Israeli act. Everybody who decided, who we saw, including, our friend from Israel, is saying that, it is very easy to, to fall for misinformation or psyops, provided by these entities. Again, as you know, this is not a Hamas action. It's, we talk about Israel, the jihadi group which is doing it. And there's so many bad actors in this playing field, and they have very less coordination in whether it is Hezbollah doing it, whether it is Hamas doing it. So the challenge is we were so quick to blame Israel because the media and the people were ready to jump the gun, that we were ready to blame Israel for anything which happens going forward. This is a warning for Israel. So even if it goes into an urban warfare, going to Gaza to go door by door or to occupy, any news will get, any misinformation coming in will always be blaming Israel, including, unfortunately, the American leadership. So as you know, American president haven't met with Netanyahu for a year or longer after he took office. And then when he first came in, he kept Netanyahu waiting in his office before meeting. But now, because it's election time coming up in next year, and Biden need to show that he's winning the war, and the timing was really unfortunate. I think he was hoping for a big diplomatic win in Israel with the peace treaty between Egypt and Gaza, and then transportation of humanitarian aid and release of some foreign prisoners. But unfortunately, they shot their own feet. I believe, unfortunately, the terrorist in this case.
No, they've not shot at their own feet. I think they have achieved a very big objective. Pathikrit, the summit that was planned in Amman, Jordan, between President Joe Biden and the King of Jordan and the President of Egypt and the Palestinian Authority President, of course, Mahmoud Abbas, would have had some implications in terms of isolating Hamas even further, in terms of building up a position that Hamas needs to be punished, even as you take care of the Palestinian cause and take care of the immediate humanitarian crisis in southern Gaza. So obviously, Hamas, fighting with its back to the wall, wanted to disrupt that summit from happening because it would have got the momentum going for an Israeli ground assault. So they have achieved their objective by pushing a narrative that, oh, look at the barbarity of Israeli airstrikes. And so the summit stands cancelled. Obviously, they have achieved their objective.
Abhishek, I'm speaking in my personal capacity. Good evening. See, first of all, from the day one when the October 7 incident happened, the objective of Hamas has been that they would kill, they will brutalize, and it will be so obnoxious that what they would do, and then they would put it up in the social media so that there is an overwhelming reaction by the Israelis, and the overwhelming reaction by the Israelis in Palestine as and when it happens, because Hamas operates from what you call civilian hotspots. There will be civilian casualties, and then they would play the victim card. The ultimate objective has been to dismantle, sabotage the Abraham Accord. Now, in this particular incident, what has happened, I think it suits their purpose when they realize that a rocket has fallen on a place which is very near to the hospital, and there has been casualty. I suspect if the casualty numbers are 500 or not, but in any case, any casualty on either side is very tragic. Now, the reality is they actually thought that let's take mileage out of it. They took the mileage. And yes, even if the state government, even if the governments of the Arab states are aware by now as to what has happened, it is very difficult for them to take a stand and say that Israel did not do this, because it is politically incorrect for these governments over there because of the popular uprising that they fear. There can be another range of Arab Spring. So to that extent, Hamas has not only been successful in sabotaging this meeting, I think in the larger extent, they have been extremely successful, sorry to say, in sabotaging the Abraham Accord, on which the critical India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor so very badly dependent upon. So, and you have, Abhishek, you have universities like Harvard who give intellectual cover fire to this entire ecosystem because they find it difficult to condemn even a heinous terror attack by the Hamas. So if there are casualties on both sides, please condemn both. I don't understand what is the problem that they cannot distinguish between having a principle of two-state theory or two-state solution, at the same time condemn organizations like Hamas. So because there's an intellectual cover that is given by the intelligentsia of the West, because the Western media to a great extent has sympathized for various reasons, including the Gulf money that comes in.
Today it has gone to that extent that even if you openly support Hamas, it is considered a freedom of expression. That is the level that it has been taken to.
Right.
It is unfortunate, but eventually, Abhishek, it will fight all of us wherever we are, because you are only emboldening organizations to emulate what Hamas has done.
Right. Quickly, Mr. Chalil, quickly. In the shortest term, Hamas has succeeded because they have thwarted the summit that was to happen in Jordan. In the short term, maybe they have still succeeded in terms of, wrecking Abraham Accord 2.0, which was to happen between Israel and Saudi Arabia. But then the medium term, it seems Hamas would be obliterated, maybe 6 months, 1 year. And in the long term, ultimately, we are going to have a Middle East which is going to be conflict-free. In fact, let me take this question to my friend from Israel. You think after Hamas has been eliminated, Israel would approach the two-state solution with more integrity than it has till now?
So first of all, I think that in the long run and the middle run, Hamas lost because of this fiasco. Because next time, other leaders will be they will not say at point one, we should blame Israel. Because now it is pretty consensus that it was not Israel, at least among the good guys. The second thing is, Israel, we also have a right-wing and the left-wing forces in Israel. And I think the more right-wing forces in Israel that now control the government, they oppose the two-state solution, never mind what. Never mind if Hamas is doing or not doing what it did in the beginning of October. So I think the question of another partition of Israel is deeper than the current conflict.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much, Lev and Dr. Joseph and Pathikrit for joining me. And as we tried to explain to the viewers how the blast in Gaza Strip hospital that killed hundreds was actually the handiwork of Islamic Jihad and Hamas and not of Israeli Defense Forces. And while in the short term, Hamas might have succeeded in getting its way, in the medium term, Hamas would be dead. In the long term, peace ultimately would prevail in the Middle East. Thank you so much, friends, for joining us. Short break. On the other side, trending burning question.
In the global employability rankings by Times Higher Education UK, only the following 6 institutions from India are ranked amongst the top 230 in the world for having the most employable graduates. IIT Delhi, IISc Bangalore, IIT Bombay, IIM Ahmedabad, IIT Kharagpur and Amity University.
We are just 1 kilometer away from the Gaza city. We have been hearing continuously an explosion. It was a missile from the airstrike from the south. We have been seeing right now rockets that was fired from Hamas has been intercepted by Israeli forces.
What we hear now.
So there is an alert. There is an alert which has been given by, as you can hear, there are explosion which is been underway, and we have been reporting from Kibbutz Be'eri. As we can see, the confidence about the Israeli forces has it, and they are on their way. We are just walking with the tanks of Israel that is moving towards Gaza. we have been reporting from Kibbutz Be'eri, which is the worst hit area by the Hamas attack. As you can see, there are bullet magazines, there are helmets of the Hamas terrorists, and the complete area has been cordoned off. We have been reporting with the Israel Defense Force. There were more than 120 people who were killed. Not only this, but the children and the people were abducted from Kibbutz Be'eri. So there is an alert. There is an alert which has been given by. As you can hear, there are explosion which is been underway, and we have been reporting from Kibbutz. As you can see, there are explosion that has been the rocket that has been fired by the Hamas, which is now been intercepted by Israel.
Right now we are at a place that has been declared as a war zone. रॉकेट लॉन्चर से स्ट्राइक किया गया था और पूरा इलाका जो है वो इस वक्त आपको दिखेगा कि तबाह हो गया है। इजराइल के जो स्पेशल फोर्सेस हैं वो यहां पर जा रही हो। रॉकेट जो है वो यहां पर दागे जा रहे हैं। अंदर से कहूंगा कि वो नीचे हो जाए और वो देखिए आप हमारे सिर के ऊपर से पास में जो है वो यहां पे मिसाइल्स गिरी है। 50 से 70 गोलियां जो हैं इस गाड़ी पर दागी गई, जिसके बाद हमास के आतंकी यहां से आगे की ओर निकले।
Israel has started to bombard Gaza in retaliation for the act of barbaric terror unleashed on the people of Israel. Netanyahu has announced his intent. There is going to be a solid ground offensive. The Hamas is in panic. There is a definite division of the world order between those who believe that Israel has the right to retaliate for the killing of its people, for the murder of its babies, for the rapes on Israeli women, and for the abduction of children and the elderly. And on the other side, the wokes. Everything you ask them, they say, look at the root cause. So-called liberals become the strongest support base for terrorists. Rape is not resistance, and murder has no morality. If you agree with me, take a stance. Say openly, but say with pride and say with aggression. Tell these wokes, rape is not resistance, and murder has no morality.
Trending Burning Question, powered by Reva University, Century Ply Laminates, co-powered by Acco Insurance and Hyundai Motors.
Hello and welcome. You're watching the Trending Burning Question with me, Shavan Sen. Ladies and gentlemen, the war between Israel and Hamas is only escalating with a massive explosion that claimed lives of around 500 people. Now, there has been a huge blame game throughout the day on who exactly was responsible for the explosion, with both sides blaming each other. US President Joe Biden is in Israel to show complete support to Israel. And the bigger question that we are raising tonight is this: whether at all Hamas, which was basically governing Gaza, was stealing the aid that was being provided to them through the United Nations as well as other Western countries. Tonight, this is yet another expose that everyone must watch as to what exactly was Hamas doing in Gaza. Are they really trying to protect their own men, or the reality is this, that they were essentially stealing the money that was coming their way? Take a look at this report and then we put out that big expose.
US President Joe Biden reached Israel for a diplomatic scramble to prevent the war with Hamas from spiraling into an even larger conflict. As Israel prepares for a potential ground invasion of Gaza in response to Hamas attacks on October 7th, Netanyahu in his statement told Biden that Israel is ready. Biden in return expressed complete support to Israel. Biden was originally scheduled to visit Jordan as well, but his meetings with Arab leaders were called off as he was leaving Washington. An explosion that killed hundreds in a Gaza Strip hospital has fueled the outrage through the Middle East, making it more challenging to hold the conflict from spreading further in the region. Agency report for Republic TV.
Joining us on the Trending Burning Question tonight are Professor Jonathan Raynold. He's from the Baser Center for Strategic Studies, joining us from Jerusalem. And you also have Hillel Neuer, who happens to be the Executive Director of UN Watch. Mr. Neuer, thank you very much for joining us on the Trending Burning Question here on Republic TV. Claims that have essentially been made by you on the social media with regards to whether at all the aid that was being provided to Gaza was essentially being stolen by Hamas. Importantly, there have been multiple reports that were essentially being suggesting over the last few weeks the fact that civilian infrastructure that was essentially being built inside Gaza was largely being used, or was used, by the Hamas to target Israel. Perhaps it's something that everyone ought to know.
Look, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be on this distinguished panel with Professor Reinhold. The issue of Hamas stealing humanitarian equipment emerged because UNRWA, the UN agency, is the one that revealed it. It is rare that a UNRWA would ever criticize Hamas. 2 years ago in the war of May 2021, the head of UNRWA in Gaza, a German citizen named Matthias Schmel, in an interview indicated that the Israeli strikes in Gaza were very precise, meaning that Israel was targeting the terrorists, Hamas or Islamic Jihad, and were not targeting civilians. And because he said the Israeli strikes were very precise, he was declared persona non grata in Gaza. He was effectively forced to leave Gaza and to leave his position as the head of UNRWA in Gaza. So normally, since then and before that, it is very rare for UNRWA to criticize Hamas. So the fact that just recently, UNRWA published a statement on their Twitter account, 3-part Twitter thread, saying urgent statement, those purporting to be from the Palestinian Ministry of Health, which means Hamas, took medical equipment and fuel, and then they deleted it. Short time later, they probably deleted it because they were afraid, but as Haaretz reported, multiple sources confirmed that the theft did happen. So we know that Hamas did steal According to the IDF, 24,000 liters of fuel. That's enough to allow the water desalination plants to supply water to hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza for at least 4 days. This was stolen by Hamas, which they will use for terrorist purposes.
Professor Reynold, I want to bring you in right now. And this argument that many are essentially making, especially for those apologists of terror. The reason why I call them apologists of terror is simply because of this. What we witnessed last evening, images that were being widely circulated, and the Western world was perhaps eager to jump on it. Western media in particular was very eager to jump on it by simply saying that, look here, it's the evil IDF which is essentially targeting innocent Gazans. I would like to juxtapose both the arguments put forward. One, with regards to the role that has essentially been played by a terrorist organization called the Hamas. Second, those who in a tacit manner have been allowing Hamas to operate in the way they have. And the arguments that they make while saying that, look here, it is Israel, the evil power that is attacking innocent life, are only fueling a terrorist organization like Hamas.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I lost you a little bit there, but yeah, look, it's simple that Hamas has been offered to rebuild the power station in Gaza, but it doesn't want to, because then it would be responsible for the electricity. It wants Israel to be responsible. Hamas uses the pipes that were brought in to carry water. It uses them to build missile launchers. Hamas is an organization that uses its resources to kill as many Israeli civilians as it can in an effort to demoralize the Israeli public, which it believes will allow it to destroy Israel. It is not interested in the welfare of the Palestinian people. It is quite happy to use them as human shields. And as we saw with their ally, Islamic Jihad, which is associated with Iran, if hundreds of Palestinian civilians die as a direct result of a missile attack targeted on Israel, which goes wrong, well, that doesn't bother them very much either. And one has to remember that about a third of all rockets launched from Gaza towards Israel actually land in Gaza. So that means a fair number of those Palestinians who are dying directly as a result of the missiles launched by Hamas and Islamic Jihad from the Gaza Strip.
Mr. Hior, if I can also bring you in right now with regards to the role that has essentially been played by the United Nations, and for those who perhaps need to understand that there is no doubt about the fact that there would be a humanitarian crisis that would emerge because of the war. But the fact of the matter is this, that you cannot somehow substitute this to simply be saying that, look here, we need to take a step back, we need to rethink as to how exactly are we going to deal with this kind of terrorism when there is a humanitarian crisis that is staring at us.
Look, every country in the world has not only the right, but the duty to protect its citizens. You know, in the Western world, when ISIS began to behead innocent civilians in the most cruel way and put it on video, in 2014, President Barack Obama, the United States, together with its allies, Britain, France, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, began to bomb ISIS in Syria and Iraq. The estimates of how many people were killed were tens of thousands in places like Mosul and other places. And, you know, the world allowed that because they were fighting ISIS. So what Israel experienced last week was shocking. About 1,400 people were murdered, 3,000 people were wounded. Families were slaughtered, children were tortured, babies were decapitated, things, horrific things like the Nazis. And that's a comparison I never like to make, but this was really like the Nazis. And Israel has a duty to defend its citizens and to put an end to the ability of Hamas to do that again. And sadly, my work is to be at the United Nations. I'm based usually in Geneva, Switzerland, at the United Nations so-called Human Rights Council. And every time that Israel seeks to defend itself, this UN body condemns Israel and effectively empowers, legitimizes, and incentivizes Hamas to keep doing what they're doing. They produce inquiries and reports that overwhelmingly point the finger at Israel, such as this UN Commission of Inquiry, now headed by Navi Pillay, where effectively the verdict is delivered in advance. So this is wrong. This is contrary to the principles and the purposes of the United Nations. If we want to see international peace and security, terrorist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, their sponsor, the Islamic Republic of Iran, need to be isolated, and the terrorist groups need to be destroyed. And that's what the UN should be supporting if they do care about true human rights and peace.
Professor Reynolds, I would like to also focus on the fact that there are reports that are now emerging with regards to how the aid was largely being used by Hamas themselves in what perhaps would have been aimed towards destroying Israel. Do you believe that it is time to rethink in the manner this kind of money, the aid that has been largely given by the Western world and the way it has been distributed should perhaps be thought again?
Yes, I think that one cannot ignore who controls an area. There is no such thing as the Palestinian people in Gaza. There is Hamas, which controls and governs and intimidates and murders and steals from the Palestinian people in Gaza. This means that if you want the aid to go to the people, Hamas needs to be replaced. And to do that, Israel has to win militarily first. Then and only then will it become possible to try to find Palestinians who will use the aid in the correct manner. Now, it has happened before. There was a Palestinian prime minister a little over a decade ago called Salam Fayyad, who did manage to use the aid in a way that encouraged and led to a greater rule of law in the West Bank and greater economic growth. And that will be the model that it would be wise to look to in the aftermath. Because otherwise, if you give aid to extreme organizations, terrorist organizations, as we've said and as we've seen and as has been proven, they will simply use it to cause more death and destruction that will not only kill Israelis, but in the end will also end up in the death of many Palestinians.
Mr. Neor, as far as the role that is being played by the United Nations, don't you believe, as the executive director of UN Watch, perhaps there ought to be a change in the manner aid is doled out, to whom it finally reaches, and who exactly is accountable for it? Let's not underestimate the fact that this aid that may have been stolen by Hamas could have actually been prevented, and you could have prevented the loss of lives that have taken place in Israel.
Yes, absolutely. We need more accountability at the UN. I would say it's one of the primary challenges at the United Nations is the lack of accountability, transparency. I've experienced it personally when UN officials in Geneva, the head of the Human Rights Council, Chief of Staff Eric Estournet, denied my ability to take the floor in the recent Human Rights Council sessions in June and July because we dare to speak out for transparency at the UN. We speak out for holding the UN to account, and they try to stifle us. And there is no accountability. So we know that when you call out in Gaza, we called out teachers from the UNRWA who promote hatred and glorify terrorists. They praise Hitler. Last week, many of the teachers at UNRWA were celebrating the terrorist attacks, and nothing happens to them. They're teachers. They have students who are the next generation of Palestinians. And we know that they have hundreds of teachers who support anti-Semitism, racism, terrorism. We have on their Facebook posts, we see them praising Hitler. And we've published this, and there's no accountability. No one's been fired. UNRWA doesn't feel the need to say anything. And at the end of the day, our member states, India, America, the EU countries, need to demand accountability from the United Nations. If the member states don't push for it, it'll never happen.
Time, put it out for the world to witness, especially for those who've been crying out loud that Israel is responsible for this humanitarian crisis. Why is it that perhaps Israel has been a little squeamish to put out the fact that civilian infrastructure that was built inside Gaza with the help of UN aid and Western world aid was largely used to target Israel? Why is it that that kind of evidence hasn't really been put out for the public, for the world to witness?
It's not that it's not being put out, it's that it's not being heard. And the world only has a certain bandwidth for messages put out by Israel. And right now, the messages have to be more focused on what is happening right now. But there will come a day of reckoning afterwards, after this war, which I hope and expect Israel to win decisively. And at that point, when international actors and regional actors come together to raise money for the reconstruction of Gaza, at that point, the information that Mr. Neuer was referring to and the evidence that he has will no doubt be put forward vigorously by Israel to demand mechanisms that ensure that aid ends up in the right places. But right now, the focus of Israel is on maintaining international legitimacy and, if possible, support for the campaign, the military campaign, the hard, difficult military campaign that lies ahead. Because without winning that war, we won't have there'll be no purpose to talking about the aid. So that is our focus at the moment.
I would like to give you, Mr. Neuer, with regards to what exactly is the way ahead, because what we're witnessing right now is that there is an attempt that has been made by a few within the Western countries right now to build some sort of a pressure on Israel that, look here, there should be a ceasefire. Secondly, the kind of statements that have come in from the United Nations, which of course it is expected, but to really say that there should be a rule of war that should be followed, or what the United States of America essentially are trying to indicate. But the fact of the matter is that, can we really talk about a ceasefire at a time when you have a country has lost hundreds and hundreds of people, some hostages that have been taken which are yet to be released? In a situation like this, what can you really expect from a country like Israel?
Well, indeed, if on September 12th, 2001, the world would have gone to the United States and said, all right, you just had the worst terrorist atrocity in your history, but now's the time for a ceasefire, they would have been laughed at. If after Pearl Harbor on December 8th, 1941, if someone had gone to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and said, all right, Japan has just attacked you in a day that will live in infamy, but now you need to have a ceasefire, they would have been laughed at. After ISIS murdered civilians from France and America, innocent people, and then they were told, well, okay, ISIS did those murders, but now you, America and France and Britain, you need to ceasefire, they would have been laughed at. What Israel has the right for is to exist. It has the right to self-defense. They were invaded. Here, I'm visiting here in Jerusalem. Israel was invaded last week on Saturday, October 7th, by thousands of Hamas terrorists. They went into the homes, into kibbutzim. These are, farm communes, families, little small villages. Families were slaughtered, and they have the right to self-defense. If Israel doesn't defend itself, it won't exist. So the Israeli government not only has the right, it has the duty to defend its citizens. So now is the time that Israel must defend itself. It must defend its citizens, and it must hit back at the terrorists. That is Israel's right, and it is its moral duty. It's what every other country in the world would have the right and duty to do, and it is the right and duty of the Israeli government to defend its people and to fight these genocidal terrorists who have shown the worst forms of inhumanity that, frankly, even in a hardened country like Israel, which has seen so many wars, it's unimaginable, and everyone here is still in a state of shock. Israel must have the right to defend itself.
Well, I would absolutely no doubt about
add to that there is something that is at stake for the wider world. It is not for nothing that President Biden has come to Israel. President Macron is coming. The German Chancellor is coming. The British have sent warships. And that is because if Hamas is allowed to survive, if this is seen to be a success, then you can expect radical Islamist groups to employ these tactics to be emboldened not only against Israel, but against all democratic countries, because they will have seen and they will have understood that democracies are not prepared to use the necessary means to win. And without winning, then there will be no democracies in the end. And that is why Israel is actually in the front line of a much, much larger war. And Israel is on one side, moderate Arab states are on the same side, the Western countries, India, we are all on the same side, and we are facing countries like Iran and radical Islamist actors like ISIS and like Hamas and like Hezbollah. And humanity as a whole and civilization needs us to win.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Renaud and Mr. Neor, for joining us on the Trending Burning Question. We're certainly hoping that the West would also now walk the talk, and hoping that Israel would not be put under undue pressure for a ceasefire, as many are now essentially demanding. Thank you very much for watching the Trending Burning Question. On the other side, the big debate with Editor-in-Chief Arnab Goswami.
In the global employability rankings by Times Higher Education UK, only the following 6 institutions from India are ranked amongst the top 230 in the world for having the most employable graduates: IIT Delhi, IISc Bangalore, IIT Bombay, IIM Ahmedabad, IIT Kharagpur and Amity University.